Hello, and thank you for checking out ChartGuys.com. We're proud to be one of the most successful technical analysis communities online, teaching you the skills to become a more confident, effective, and informed trader. Join our community of hundreds of analysts worldwide, working together to learn the charts, generate profits, and achieve financial independence. Join us for live daily chart analysis and market coverage, a thriving chart community, and access exclusive educational materials. We look forward to seeing you. Now, let's check out some charts.
Well, that was in response to a lot of people who didn't like the new intro, so we got Christopher Walken to do the new intro for us. So I hope that was enjoyable. Hey everyone, checking in on USMJ names. We've got a bunch to go through. I think we got about 20 tickers up here. We're going to look on the longer term time frames and then zoom in for a little bit more details. As always, the S&P 500 is in full-on bull mode, less than 1% away from all-time highs. So we ideally want to see names strong, reflecting the market sentiment, and we are not seeing that this past week. It is very notable that we are seeing significant weakness in the USMJ names coming off that major bull run, and we are fading without any weakness in the market overall. So this is potential indication of the start of a weakening summer. We're going to be cautious to not sit in positions and bag hold unless that's your game plan to hold longer term, which is completely fine as long as you allocate funds for it and establish that game plan beforehand. Otherwise, we are going to be looking for better longer term entries. GWPH on the daily time frame. So this past week for GWPH, we did break the lower high pattern by getting over 171.74. That's a start to try and change the trend, but we have to confirm it with a higher low and higher high. We broke the lower highs last time a few weeks ago and got no follow through and no confirmation. That's why the confirmation is so important for the bulls to prove not only can we break resistance, but we can see healthy consolidation and then continuation. So at this point, the weekly consolidation on GWPH is still just fine coming off of that all-time high. There's no major red flags, but we need the daily higher low holding 159.02 and then the bull break of 174 to change that daily trend and have us looking back at that all-time high. So a potential play off of 159.02 support is approaching this coming week, and I would like to see that hourly RSI in oversold conditions heading towards that support level to make the odds of holding it at least initially better. IIPR is also trying to recover back to the all-time high. We were looking for that bounce play that ended up playing out, and what we've seen since then is continuation. There's our confirmation of the trend change. Solid bounce, higher low. 80.63 is the most important support in the short term, and then we got a bull break of 84.87, the top at that point, to get some follow through. It's not significant follow through at this point, but we did close at the high of the day 2 out of the last 3 days, and after 86.35, our current top, we're looking at 88, 89.50, and 90.67 before that all-time high. Not a ton of resistance, and the weekly time frame is still bouncing from that higher low. Keeping in mind that when I look at this weekly chart, I say, all right, the most likely scenario, in my opinion, is that we're going to form a weekly lower high compared to 93.24. Losing the daily uptrend, losing the higher lows before 93.24 tells us that our weekly lower high has been set. So looking at the daily time frame, if we lose the higher low pattern before 93.24, our lower high will be set. That is not happening at this point, but it is something we are keeping an eye out for, because if that does occur, then we know the weekly higher low will have to form probably in the low $80 range compared to 75.56. So broader perspective, lower high anticipated, not seeing any sign of it on the daily time frame at this point, but certainly something to be watching over the next week or two. CURA is confirming the daily bear flag. So again, it was very notable that we saw strength in the Canadian space yesterday in response to CGC getting added to the TSX 60. That helped, that index. But USMJ did not see any strength. It faded all day. And we're looking down at 1182, and that did break. So the daily bear flag confirms. We were watching that 4-hour head and shoulders pattern, and it was a very brief bounce that ended up dropping to lower lows. So our new daily lower high is at 1285. And now we're looking down at the next support level of our 1107 support. So the weekly time frame is now in consolidation mode. The last weekly support was 815, so anything above that keeps the weekly uptrend intact. And this is a scenario where in recent videos, maybe a week ago, we were talking about how bulls are looking for entries for daily higher lows on USMJ names. We got a bounce. We got some decent upside on that initial bounce, solid 9% move, but obviously no follow through, just one green day. So that's the kind of scenario where if I'm looking for a longer term entry, let's say I make an entry on the hourly time frame, we had a break of the lower highs. Let's say if I were to make an entry on the break of the lower highs of 1238, and then the fact that we dropped straight down and broke those levels and saw no follow through for the bulls, I would want to exit, break even if I could, or a small loss otherwise, seeing that, nope, we have not formed a daily higher low and we are not seeing strength. Because what that allows me to do is to keep funds for another better play. So if I take a small loss on that daily bounce attempt, and now I can see that the weekly consolidation is underway, I still have that cash available and I could say, all right, daily uptrend is no longer in favor for the bulls, but the weekly uptrend certainly is. So I'm going to now be patient and scout for a weekly higher low to try and make a better entry. So the bears still have complete control in the short term, but we are going to be looking for that weekly higher low to form. Hourly RSI has not gotten too extended to the downside, as we do see short-term bounces that cool off RSI levels, but keeping an eye on a weekly higher low for CURA and a lot of these US multi-state operators for April and May. And then, of course, if we lose the weekly uptrend over the summer, that would be a much bigger red flag for the sector as a whole if we would start seeing that. But most names are in weekly uptrends in the USMJ space. CWEB had a much bigger gap up open, had a much stronger open than most names. 31.26 was our high, and we rejected from that level by 11 cents. So that's now a double top, and we are going to be watching for a tightening range between those levels. And I don't like the shorter term time frames here because there's lots of gaps everywhere, but pretty much the most important support is 29.55 and the most important resistance is 31.26. So if we consolidate, we're going to look for the bulls to attempt to form a higher low compared to 29.55 in the first couple days of this week, and we'll watch for a tightening daily range to break sometime potentially in the later half of next week. Keeping in mind that we have another slew of earnings in the USMJ space. A lot of these names, maybe 4 or 5 of them, are going to have earnings in the last week of April. So make sure and double check and see which names those are. But for right now, CWEB on the weekly, we are still holding on just fine. If we lose the daily uptrend, we're going to look for a weekly higher low compared to 25.36. But we're not going to look to the weekly chart to consolidate unless we lose 29.55 support. TRUL sold off. It pretty much pulled the same scenario to a certain degree as GTII. And actually, I don't have GTII on here, so we'll add them next. So GTII had the bull, well, let's do TRUL. Bull reaction to earnings and then just sold off in a weak market environment and has not found a bottom yet from that sell-off. So we're looking down at support of 16.05 as the next level, and weekly consolidation is now clearly underway. Anything above 14.97 keeps the weekly uptrend of higher lows in control. The sooner the bulls form that higher low, the better. The last higher low formed off the 12-period exponential support. That's a rough visual guide to be watching, and that's down in the mid $16 range. So if we keep seeing weakness, that's an area to be scouting for a higher low on the weekly. The hourly RSI is pretty beat up, so if we start Monday with weakness, with either a lower open or a break of 17.24 first thing, that hourly RSI is going to be getting oversold, and there is a clear support level at 16.05 to be watching, but momentum is shifting in the USMJ space, and we're looking for weekly higher lows to form. So GTII had earnings one day before TRUL, and it did similar things. It saw strength first thing that sold off, closed at the low of the day, and then saw follow through the following day. We did get a higher open with no bull volume behind it on Friday. And again, most of MJ's sector saw a little bit of strength in the morning due to that CGC news, in my opinion, lifting the sector as a whole, both US and Canadian. And then the US names clearly one by one. I started the morning with my screen mostly green, and I'd see one red name in the US space, then another, then another, then another, and just one by one started to see those names fade back to red conditions. So we do have a daily inside bar to be watching on Monday. If 19 breaks, we're looking at 1870, and if 1940 breaks, we're looking up at 1995. So the hourly trend is trying to change, but we need the higher low and higher high to confirm that trend change. GTII is seeing weekly consolidation, Anything above 1575 keeps the weekly uptrend intact, and the bulls are going to try and hold. Again, look at the 12-period exponential. First it was resistance, now it's acting, well, really, first it was support, then it was resistance, now it's back to support. It's held multiple tests of consolidation, and we're approaching that level with where we stand right now. So weekly consolidation underway for GTII. IAN is the most crushed USMJ name that I saw this past week. Absolute waterfall, breaking key weekly supports, and this is now visually very clearly a monthly equilibrium in my opinion. We are going to be looking for a monthly higher low compared to make that 450. And we're going to be looking for, I'm personally going to be scaling back into a long-term position. So I had the long-term position from before the MPX merger. I exited on this daily inside bar breaking bearish because initially I said to myself, all right, if we break 651 on the way down here, I'm not going to sell because we'll be too overextended. I'm going to sell in a short-term bounce. That changed when we got the short-term bounce before the break, because what that bounce does is it cools off the hourly RSI level, which was already in the low 20s, but then by the time that bounce took place, it took us all the way back to 40. And looking at it on the 4-hour time frame, that RSI was down just above 30, and it took it back up to 37. So that was an instance where it was a very weak bounce attempt that cooled off RSI levels, ended up being a 4-hour bear flag, and allowed for another leg down. So if that little bounce did not happen, I would not have stopped myself out on a break of 651. But because that bounce happened, I did stop myself out on that inside bar breaking bearish at 670. And now I'm looking to re-add those positions again. And I'm able to do so cheaper and add more shares for the same amount of capital. And I'm going to be, actually did enter a position on Friday down near the low of the day. So I am slightly green with where we stand right now. And if we see further weakness and a more clear bear break, I did enter because of this double bottom on Friday, and it just held that support pretty much all afternoon. But I will look to exit, or I will look to enter more in daily oversold conditions if to start this coming week we break $6, because again, my broader, longer term perspective is looking for a monthly higher low. There's a lot of space where that could happen. You know, we could still drop another 20% and still remain in this pattern. But because we're so extreme on the daily, I'm looking for a short-term bounce. I have not decided if these are going to be my new longer-term positions because I have to see what the bounce looks like. I want to see the volume behind it. And if it's just a weak bounce to cool off RSI levels like that 4-hour weak bounce was, I'm going to lock in my gains or at least set a stop at break even. And then if I get stopped out, back to the drawing board. I have cash ready and I will add lower if we keep dropping down. But for me personally, I'm looking for at least a little 5% bounce to cool off the daily RSI levels. And if we start the bounce on Monday, the position I have, that's good enough for me. I don't need to add anything. That'll be some nice profit. But again, if we do not bounce and we keep dropping and we get this daily RSI down in the 20s, that is when I will look to continue scaling in, anticipating the daily oversold bounce. So monthly time frame is the most clear for IAN, and it is following the same pattern as CGC on the monthly chart. HARV, so another one with a weak bounce attempt, no follow through, inside bar bear break, another inside bar. Look at the volume. There is just no bull volume on this move, and we have lost the daily uptrend. So we're looking now at 1146 and 1117 as support with resistance of 1190 and 1224. But looking at the weekly chart, we're just looking for a higher low to form compared to 778. So while things are pretty bleak this week for the sector as a whole, weekly uptrends intact everywhere for these USMJ names. Hourly RSI is not oversold because these little bounces on the daily giving us these inside bars cool off RSI levels. To change this hourly trend, the bulls need to form the higher low at 1146 and break 1190, and then our daily bounce will be underway, but we will still certainly be expecting a daily lower high compared to 1450. For us to have confidence that our weekly higher lows are established, we need daily trend changes back in favor of the bulls. So what that would look like here, if HARV's going to change this daily trend, we need to bounce, set a lower high, come down, hold the bottom of this consolidation, and then break to higher highs. That's what pretty much everybody needs to confirm the weekly uptrend has been set. Or the weekly higher low has been set. That being said, if you wait for that daily confirmation, you're giving up a lot of that move. And while the risk is not that high, the reward, certainly you're giving up a bunch of that. So that's why we try and look for the shorter term details to put ourselves in favorable positions to try and enter. And again, I'll try and put myself in positions to look for weekly higher lows And if I'm wrong, I just want to stop out, break even, or small losses to make another attempt in the future again. So there's nothing wrong with being wrong as long as you just limit that risk and keep it very small. I'm always looking for scenarios where my risk to reward is favorable. And if I can get into a scenario where my risk is very small, I'll take that opportunity every time, especially if I'm looking to continue an uptrend on the weekly time frame. So OH is tight on the daily, and OH has a little double top at 1238 inside bar. If this breaks bearish, this looks like a little bit, I wouldn't exactly call it a bear flag, but a weak bounce attempt and then drop to lower lows. If we break 1155 Monday, we have to be cautious of that. After 1155, we're looking at 1131, the bottom. If we can break 1194, we're looking back up at resistance of 1238. But again, weekly consolidation looking like it's going to start. We have a pattern of higher lows every week, 6 weeks in a row. If that pattern breaks with a break of 1131 this coming week, then weekly consolidation certainly is underway, and we will look for a higher low compared to 857. But we don't have the clear weekly consolidation signal yet, as we do on a bunch of these names. Just looking at TRUL, higher lows every week, 4 weeks in a row, that pattern broke. So we have weekly consolidation. But that's not the case for OH because it has held up a little bit better. It had the bigger bull day back on Wednesday and didn't see as much bearish follow through back on Thursday. So that's little bit of extra strength comparative to the sector is keeping it from being in weekly consolidation mode just yet. CL also sideways trading, a little bit of a double bottom at 1467 and 1472. Inside bar, no volume on Friday, and the weekly chart not consolidating here either, very correlated to OH with that deal that is pending, or I should say waiting on approval. But we've got higher lows every week, 5 weeks in a row. If we break 1467 this coming week, weekly consolidation to form a higher low compared to 1026 is underway. These are the two strongest names, in my opinion, on these charts at this point, because we're coming off of all-time highs, as other names are as well, but we're holding up better. And that news and that deal is a reason for that, in my opinion. So MMEN has long been the weakest of the MJ names that we've been watching. And the weekly time frame, I said, all right, we broke the lower highs, but we need proof of a higher low and higher high to confirm the weekly trend change. And we're not getting it. We're heading right back down to our recent support. 355 is the must-hold level. If we break 355, we have very little support before all-time lows, 346 and then 311. So the weekly trend is not changing. 355 is a must-hold short-term level. The daily RSI is not oversold. These little bounces are cooling off things, keeping that RSI from oversold. Look at just how over the past 5, 10, pretty much 3 weeks of trading, we've had 3 green days, none of them with any bull volume. This one, a ton of that is selling pressure with that big upper wick. So there is just no bull volume 3 weeks in a row on MMEN, and it's causing it to fade back down. So I know people are looking for potential longer terms in MMEN, and I'm not big on fundamentals at this point. I'm aware of what the fundamentals are, but I'm not going to be looking at long term in a company that's in a weekly downtrend. It just doesn't make sense to me to be looking for an entry in a weekly downtrend when we have so many weekly uptrends to be watching. KSHB, gap up on earnings reaction. All that bad news was priced in. They're talking about uplisting again. You better believe if they uplist, they're going to be the flavor of the week as far as traders and attention in the MJ space goes. So keep an eye out for that. We saw what it did with VFF. We've seen what it's done with other names as well. And again, even just myself specifically as an individual trader and a tiny fish in a big, big ocean, I will trade more significant capital on names that are more liquid and uplisted than I will on names that are not. So if that's affecting me as a tiny minnow, it's certainly affecting the entire broader market as a whole. So we did drop back down and fill the gap. 555 gap filled, and that was the low of the day. So that was a really nice target for those looking for a bounce. And we pulled back all morning, and that was a beautiful move. So right when we filled that gap, 5-minute trend changed right after that, increasing bull volume, and then we double topped at the high of the day. So we do have an hourly equilibrium to be watching. High, low, lower high, and bulls are trying for a higher low compared to that 555 level, but that's where gaps can certainly come in handy. And on that scenario, I wouldn't necessarily just say gaps filled, entered. I would say gaps filled, let's look for the reversal, and that break of 562 was as clear as you can get. With that many rejections from that 562 resistance, as soon as that breaks, that is the go signal for bulls. So a nice tight pattern on the hourly to be watching into Monday. And on the weekly time frame, we did break this equilibrium bearish, but no follow through thanks to that earnings save. So this is a scenario where we have a bear break of no follow through. Let's now see if that's a catalyst for a shift in momentum to the other direction. Monthly time frame, not really seeing a whole lot of clarity. And weekly time frame is now what I would call choppy with that bear break and no follow through, but it's all about changing the daily trend. This is a bounce off the lows. We know anything under 609 is just a lower high, and we need the daily higher low and higher high to confirm that daily trend change. And the bulls have now a lot of space to work with to form that higher low in consolidation once we do top out. So if the hourly equilibrium breaks bearish, we look for the daily higher low to form. And if it breaks bullish, then we're looking at 609 resistance. CBSI, nice recovery here as well. We're staying in the tightening range. I like it better on the 4-hour for clarity, where we have our low of the pullback. High of the bounce was 590. Higher low was 543, and we're heading up to resistance. And it's actually a double top at 598 and 599. So not 590, 599. Double top resistance in play and a higher low to be watching. So if the bulls can break that resistance level of 5.9, we'll call it $6, that's the signal that our weekly higher low is established. So this so far is perfection as far as what the bulls want to see after a weekly equilibrium break. This weekly equilibrium took months to play out. We broke bull. We didn't get a ton of follow through. It was some nice follow through, but healthy consolidation, no red flags on volume, long lower wicks of bulls buying the dip, bounced right off the 12-period exponential support. And if we change that daily trend and break that resistance, we're looking right back up at 621 and 659. And best case scenario for these bulls is weekly continuation, because then we're just looking at all-time highs. So keep an eye on CBSI. I'm liking this weekly time frame at this point. And if we break $6 this coming week, then the odds will favor the bulls even more. NBEV. So this is a scenario where I talked about that news after it came out, and I said, wow, with that price reaction, I assumed that it was CBD drinks that was Walmart getting into it. And I cautioned about the potential that people didn't know that it was not the CBD drinks. And then I went around social media and checked in, and some other people were sharing the same sentiment. I just read an article or a post just on Reddit, and props to this guy for posting it, but he just said, I'm a long-term follower of NBEV, and I had assumed that this was CBD drinks, and it's not. So heads up, because I think the market is pricing something in and is doing it incorrectly. And we ended up fading 4 days after that. Obviously, the overall market conditions in the sector did not help, but to get back the entirety of that move, pretty much 95% of that move on that news tells you that the market did a bad job of pricing that news in. That's hype and FOMO, and then this is days later of everybody realizing, oh, well, it's not what we thought it was, and we got too excited and overreacted. So to change this momentum, and it's worth watching to change this momentum, because I do anticipate that the bulls will be able to hold 525. I would say it's more likely than not that we can form a higher low compared to that level and then try and get some turnaround. You can see it's fairly contained consolidation. And if we look at it on a long-term time frame, it looks like an equilibrium setup. So we were looking at our low and high, and we're going to look for a higher low to form. But we need to see the hourly trend change. And right now we have the low of 539. High of the bounce is 560. Higher low is 542. And if the bulls can break 560, we'll have an hourly trend change. That would be the first indication that our daily higher low has formed. And then we would look for that shift in momentum. Also watch for a volume spike. A volume spike after declining volume 4 days in a row would tell us that we're likely seeing the daily high, the daily low formed before a shift in momentum, because that volume spike is going to be coming with the last push from the bears and then a solid initial push of bulls buying that dip. And when those two forces convene together, that's when you get those volume climaxes at the tops and bottoms. I better speed this up. SNN daily inside bar, no volume whatsoever, but same thing. When we have this much volatility, we look for an equilibrium. So low, high, we're scouting the higher low. If the inside bar breaks bullish, we will have our higher low at 470. If it breaks bearish, then we will not have our higher low at 470, or we will not be confident in that. So looking at the longer term time frame, weekly chart, formed a lower high here. It's a little choppy. We've been within this range for a long time. This is now 1, 2, 3.5 months within this range. And look at the range being set here, 418 to 542. And that's pretty much the range, 423 to 550. Very similar range in these 2 weeks as it was back here. So pretty stuck and right in the middle of it. And aside from looking for a daily high or low, otherwise I'd be patiently waiting for a more clear break of this weekly range. PLTH still holding on well for these bulls, but we have to be cautious if we set a 4-hour lower high. And again, just the 4-hour time frame for clarity. If we cannot break 334, we're going to have to pull back and form a higher low compared to 285. So 330, 321 and 334 are the most important resistances Monday and Tuesday. But if we lose the hourly uptrend without breaking those levels, if we were to drop down Monday and break 312 and 310, then a 4-hour equilibrium is what we would be watching. But overall for PLTH, daily time frame very strong, weekly chart, all-time high resistance is standing right there. And if we need to see some daily consolidation, some further daily consolidation before testing that all-time high, we would have to break that 4-hour equilibrium bearish. So that's the best pattern and best time frame to be watching in my opinion. SLNG. So weekly charts coming off the all-time high, but we gave back a ton of that move. Certainly not a strong close. And from that all-time high to where we stand now, the pullback, again, the faster you move up, the faster you're going to pull back. 22% down in 4 days after going 54% up. So again, equilibrium, most likely scenario after that volatility, the low of 187, the high of 290, and now we're looking for the higher low to form. Long lower wick, so I want to know, has the hourly trend changed? And it has not. So we will need to top out on the hourly, form a higher low and a higher high to confirm the hourly trend has changed. That confirmation will make us confident the daily higher low has been established, but we can make a play off of this support of 227. If we get a bit more bounce follow through, then we would look to make an entry. Potentially, this is a potential trade setup on what I would look for personally. So again, longer term scenario, I'm looking for a daily equilibrium. That's the backbone of my trade. Now I'm looking for the shorter term signals to give me the indication that that is playing out, which would be an hourly trend change. So if I'm going to be looking to make an entry, the best risk to reward that I can look for is to try and enter on the hourly higher low with my stop, the low, because I know if that low is going to break, I'm wrong. The daily higher low has not been set yet, and I don't want to be in that trade if I'm wrong. And the risk would be small. Let's say that is our top of 245. Again, I'd like to see a bit more follow through to give the bulls some more space to work with. But if we pull back to 235 and I make my entry, I'm risking maybe 8 cents before getting stopped out. And the reward would be a bull break of 245 and continuation on the hourly, which would give me, a risk to reward of potentially 2 to 1 plus. So that's just a rough trade example of what goes through my head when I'm establishing a trade game plan. PYX is just this slow fade. We got the red flags back here with the inability to break that 4-hour, and it's been nothing ever since those red flags. It's been nothing but a daily lower high every single day now, 8 days in a row. So very convincing follow through for those bears. This is a broader equilibrium pattern to be watching as well. Looking at it on a monthly chart, high, low, lower high, and we're scouting the monthly higher low. So at this point, again, there's a lot of space where we could pull back. We can pull back all the way down towards 1130, and that's significant. But I would like to see daily RSI get oversold. Then I might get interested looking for a bounce. We're on the verge of oversold, so if we break 1959, the next clear daily support level is 1505. So keeping in mind that because we ran up so hard and so fast, the lack of support established means that RSI levels can get more extended to the downside. These little 4-hour bounces are keeping that RSI from getting extreme, but the 4-hour is oversold. So I know that if we continue down on Monday and get daily oversold conditions, I'd like to see the price get to the low $19 range before I would be interested in starting to scale in for a potential bounce. But again, it's just the longer term pattern of knowing that a monthly higher low is likely to form in the teens and trying to time the daily oversold conditions with that higher low potentially forming. But I'm going to keep an eye on this one, but no immediate plans. I'd like to see that daily RSI at least down around 28, 27 before I start to get interested. ZYNE, equilibrium looks likely. High of the bull reaction, low of the daily pullback. Looks like our lower high is set. Have we lost the hourly uptrend? And I would say we have not just yet, but if we break the low of today or of Friday, then we certainly have. So 828 breaking would give us our lower high at 905. And on the 4-hour time frame, a little bit more condensed. I actually don't like that view. So keeping it to the daily chart and just looking for confirmation, has our daily lower high been set? This is the same thing that we were looking for VFF, just in a much shorter time frame. So VFF is in the Canadian side of things, but just as a comparison, VFF on the daily chart, the size of the pullback is why we were looking for a lower high. And every day we're saying the bulls still have control, but don't lose sight that we're looking for that lower high to be set. And this took, 2-3 weeks to play out, whereas this ZYNE is taking just 1.5 weeks to play out. So high, low, scouting the lower high. If it forms, we're going to look for a higher low compared to 749 and a tightening range into next week. If the bulls are going to see continuation, they're going to need some bull volume associated with it. So if we were to see a solid green day with more than 3.5 million shares traded, we could potentially break 949. So it's not out of the picture. It's just what's the most likely scenario. ACRG, break of daily support and a loss of the uptrend with no follow through. That bear break was 1998. We built a base of support and now we're trying to bounce. That tells me to zoom out and look for healthy weekly consolidation. We know we have a longer term equilibrium here to be watching. Our lower high, higher low. Our lower high is 2320 and the bulls are trying to form a higher low as soon as possible on this weekly chart, but we have to change the daily trend to do so. So if we bounce and set a lower high compared to 2262, we will then need a higher low and continuation for that weekly higher low to be established. If you want to be a patient trader, this is one to write down on your piece of paper. I still have it here from the last video where I wrote it down. Keep an eye on the longer term pattern. Be patient. No need to try and play within this pattern. There's plenty of other names out there, but I want to keep an eye on this because when this pattern does break, we could see some significant follow through. CBSI was the same thing in its longer term pattern. Kept an eye on it. And when that 570 bull break occurred, we shot right up to 659. Significant gains in the short term. So that's why the longer term equilibriums are worth watching. LDS, low cap penny stock, very big bull day, bull volume showing up. So this is a 4-hour tightening pattern that broke bullish. 49 was our high, 42 was the low, 48.5 was a double top, formed a higher low at 43, and then very significant bull day on Friday, breaking some resistance levels. So the weekly chart is changing the trend and shifting momentum. And we want to see a clear break over 50. After 50, it's 53, but 50 is the resistance level and the highest price in the last few months. So we're looking at, can the bulls break $50 early next week and continue this breakout? You could say it's a cup and handle pattern. Psychology is there. It's a little bit, I certainly wouldn't put it in a textbook, but the bottom line is resistance, rejecting from resistance, healthy consolidation, and then a bull break, trying for a breakout on high volume. And if we see more than 1 million shares traded on Monday, we can anticipate that we will very easily break 50 if that volume is there. Last, BAM. So talked about BAM last week, and I said, you do not want to be buying up here. It's way overextended. From that point on, the next 2 days, we established support by trading sideways. That's the bulls cooling things off, and that gives you levels to establish a trade game plan around. So when you're looking at this, you say, wow, the bulls have no support on the way up. And if I'm buying, the risk to reward is very high in favor of risk because if a temporary top is hit and we pull back, I'm going to very quickly be down 10%. That being said, this was the ideal scenario. Sideways consolidation, the bulls take a breather, and we got a tightening range. It ended up just being a 4-hour bull flag. But if you look at it on the hourly, it was a tightening range. We had 160 and 144, 1 hour of action setting the range. We then double topped with 159. We came down, held 144 support with a lower open, and then that bull break of 160 was the go signal again. So 2 days of sideways trading. Look at the hourly RSI. When we did that video, that hourly RSI was in the 80s. That sideways trading allowed that hourly RSI to cool back all the way to 60, and the 4-hour RSI at that point cooled off from way overextended at 95. It dropped back down to 84. Again, not a huge cool off, but just a little bit of a breather. And how I imagine this, I might have said this in an MJ video already, but I imagine the bulls in a battle or running a race, and they're extremely extended, and this allows them to literally stop and take a breather, catch their breath build up their energy for continuation to keep running that race going forward. I don't like to think of bulls and bears battling each other and getting all bloody. I like to think of racing, and they're wearing their uniforms and running a marathon. So increasing bull volume on the continuation was ideal. We had a close at the high of the day, huge bull volume follow through on Thursday. This looks like a potential volume climax, and this is why you have to zoom in to the shorter term time frames for details. This is a bearish reversal, shooting star candlestick with an upper wick and a volume climax. If you only show me that, I would say it's likely our temporary top is in. But I went and looked at the hourly chart. This is healthy consolidation. There's no red flags. Huge bull volume, no significant bear volume. We're just looking for an hourly higher low to form. Remember, it's a loss of the hourly uptrend. If we were to reject from 230 and then break 202, then that would change things. It's a loss of the hourly uptrend that tells us the temporary top is in and daily consolidation is coming. We have not lost the hourly uptrend, so zooming in for the details is very important. We might have a record 35-minute video. I'm done talking. See you. Have a good times. Be great. I forgot to do labs. Labs is a raging bull, certainly standing out, and we now have a subsector to be watching in the MJ sector, which is extraction plays, because they are certainly going to have more reaction to news, whether it's related to edibles, whether it's related to FDA decisions to put CBD in, food products. So keep an eye on labs and the extraction space. But we were coming off all-time highs, and we had multiple tops, and this was just a very clear bull break. 476, 478, 475, a brick wall of resistance. We kept the uptrend with a higher low at 424, a higher low at 431, a higher low at 442, and then we finally got the bull break on huge volume and closed at the high of the day, looking for more this coming week. So we're looking up at 530, 540, psychological resistances. Our new short-term support level is 492, and keep an eye on labs. Very strong name in a very weak sector this previous week. So picking up Adventure Time, back 5 years ago when I was in Costa Rica. It's Friday, so we've got a sour brown from New Belgian Brewery in town. So at nighttime in Costa Rica, all the creatures would come out. And from the last video, you could see that the spot we were staying in was very exposed to the elements. So the bugs and the critters were always coming inside. And it was not uncommon to have a scorpion in the bedroom or a crab in the kitchen. And the bugs at night would come and be attracted to any lights we had on. So the geckos would all hang out around the lights, and they would just feast on all the flies and the bugs that would land near the lights. So that was fun to just watch every night. Some more different little iguana guys. Dan in the beach. Cowboy wondering what's going on. Baloo. Very comfortable with her new guardians. And just more incredible beach sunset. There was a moment where we were floating in the water and the sun was looking like that. And I said, if life is a trip, I'm peaking right now. And that's pretty much how I felt in terms of just perfection, alignment of everything. And someone posted on the other video, the fact that I made money while I was at this place and came back with more was likely a direct result to being so in line and so in tune with everything that was going on in terms of being in the zone. That was it. And being able to get yourself to that place, things just seemed to work out. Banana trees were all around. And again, we would just get fruit right from the yard. I mean, you had unlimited mangoes coming out of that yard. This was a neighbor's puppy. And this little dude just looked like he was stoned every single picture that you can take of him. But he was a cute little dude, and it was fun to watch him interact with Baloo, who was pretty much a bigger version, and kind of get shown the ropes, roughed around a little bit, but that's what it's like on the street. So for story time here at the end, I've told this story before, but if there's a resume of my life, or a life resume and what I'm good at, what I would list, it would be technical analysis, farming, rock hopping, and breaking up dogfights would be, and ping pong. Ping pong's up there. But breaking up dogfights is something I've done a lot. When I was on the farm in Maine, we had 2 female dogs that were not spayed, And so they did not accept. I mean, most times with animals, they accept their pecking order instantly. It gets determined very quickly, and that's that. But when there's two animals that do not accept it, there is constant posturing and battle for that top spot. And we had this dog who was we had two Australian shepherds, and one of them would just herd the other one and just walk straight behind it and literally be right on its back legs wherever we went. And every now and again, the one who was getting followed would just get fed up and say, nope, this is going down right now. And they would go at it and draw blood. And, there were times where I would have each of them in a headlock and they would still get out and go after each other. And it never got to the point where they would bite us. So I was never, scared of that, but they were intense. So in this instance, we were in the water one evening, just like this. And Baloo and Cowboy were out, and we didn't have her collar on, which was not good. But Baloo and Cowboy were on the ocean, or on the beach by the ocean. They didn't really like coming in, so they would hang out and wait for us to come out. And these four big dogs that looked like they just came off a Siberian mountain came out of the woods. And they were fine. They were just walking along, and they walked over, and we left the water to go say what's up to them. They looked like some really cool dogs. I don't know what breeds they were. They were giant and fluffy and probably very hot in Costa Rica. But there were no red flags. I have a very good sense of reading animal body language through my experiences on farms and things like that. And there was no red flags. And out of nowhere, one of them just snapped and got Baloo on her back real quick and had her jaws around Baloo's neck. And so I was standing right there and instantly ran as fast as I could straight up to her. And that's the kind of thing where you don't even think about it. It's just adrenaline, instant reaction. And threw all my body weight into the dog and nailed my knees into its back hind legs, pretty much into its butt. And that surprised the dog a lot. And so it yelped, and I threw it to the side, and then Baloo got up, and Baloo tried to go after the dog, so I had to keep them separated. And then my buddy picked up Cowboy and said, "Heads up, Dan." And I looked up, and there were four dogs just surrounding me, all staring at me like they were just waiting to determine what the next move was. And for a second, I thought it was about to be a battle royale. But fortunately, they stood down, and their companion limped off. And I felt really bad because I definitely hurt that dog. But saw it the next couple of days, and it was limping, but didn't break any bones or anything like that. So that was a big adrenaline rush, and certainly a fun story to relive, but glad to protect Baloo. And after that, we had this bond where she knew I was alpha, and there was this instant unspoken respect where it's like, it's hard to describe, but she knew I had her back, and that was a fun moment. So that's it. USMJ video tomorrow. Although I guess this video is going to be at the end of the USMJ video too. So now we're getting all Inception-like. Have a good weekend. We'll see you next week.